So on that note, I want to introduce our keynote speaker, and his name is Chris Lencheski. He's the president of the Philadelphia headquartered Comcast Spectacor subsidiary, Front Row Marketing Services and Front Row Analytics. Front Row with operating divisions in the specific practices of college rights, municipal rights, digital film and TV rights, venue and team rights, and social media, which is huge right now, is a collection of veteran sports, entertainment, and media executives operating on 4 continents in offices in 35-plus cities. Front Row builds commercial rights programs for a collection of quality third-party clients from pro teams, colleges, leagues, stadium authorities, entertainment companies, and municipalities that sell commercial rights based on directed research executed through Front Row's proprietary in-house analytics group. The firm's executive experience base includes NCAA and every major league in the United States, as well as the largest global sporting events from the World Cup, America's Cup, Olympics, and the English Premiership League. This guy's an important guy, as you can tell. He's an innovative international business strategist. He's built successful media and entertainment agencies from the ground up, generated multi-million-dollar revenue and portfolio growth, been instrumental in forging highly lucrative relationships between corporations and some of the world's most high-profile brands, organizations, and events. Prior to joining Comcast Spectacor, he was the founder, CEO, president of award-winning sports marketing agency Ski and Company, SKI and Company, and was proudly awarded the first ever global agency of record designation by General Motors. He's also past owner of a hockey league. Yeah, the Quad City Mallards he owns. That is a proud IHL affiliate. If you haven't seen IHL hockey, it's a trip. There's a fight every five minutes, I think. Yeah. Exactly. Flyer fans love the IHL. And the Mallards, by the way, were the 2009 IHL Team of the Year. Without further ado, let me introduce our keynote speaker, Chris Lencheski.
Well, I hate to cut off Ethel Merman because that might be sacrilegious. And Kate Smith didn't sing that song, apparently had a big fight. Mike, thanks for the introduction. Ike Richmond, the head of corporate communications, did a tremendous job on that. We pay Ike extra when it makes us sound really good. Thank you, everybody, for allowing me the opportunity to come and speak. I know Hayne and a few of us were at the SBJ Awards last night. Quickly, congratulations to NBC Sports Media. A bit of a home call there for winning an award, as well as the Brooklyn Nets, who took one of the big awards last night. On behalf of everybody at Comcast Spectacor, if I may speak, particularly for Front Row, thank you for the opportunity to come and present as a keynote. And to John Lord, Dean D'Angelo, and Faust, and I will say this because, Mike, you talk about people. Faust's father and myself and got together and said we're going to bring baseball team in Lehigh Valley a long time ago. I was very young. I had a small company that we would later grow to a great agency. And I said, I think I can raise $25 million. And, of course, the owner of the current team said, there is no way you're going to raise $25 million. You're not going to raise $5. 6 months later, Governor Casey walks in. We have $25 million. I said, you know what? You can make it happen if you have the will and the ability, and you just don't know any better. And the next thing you know, we have what is the most successful AAA franchise in God knows how long. And yes, Mike, the Quad City Mallards do have fights, and IHL hockey's perfect for the Philadelphia Flyers, which is what led me to come to Comcast Spectacor, very much the beneficial interest. And I work really at the behest of the board, as well as Mr. Luco and Mr. Page. And they're great employers. Peter is a wonderful person to work for. If you pick them up, the shoes just need a little bit of polish, and the shirt's pressed right, and you're in good shape. So, Front Row, and why are we here and what we're going to talk about? And I'm going to try and move this real quickly because I know for Hayne and I, we were out till midnight at the SBJs last night in New York, so we're not probably going to be too coherent. But Front Row is part of the Comcast family of companies. And what does that mean? Well, for everybody in this room, you know what? If you haven't yet graduated or you're about to graduate, you just fell into the mother lode of sports entertainment because the biggest media company in the world sits at the big USB port on 1701 JFK Boulevard. All right? Looks like a big USB port, right? Comcast, look at it again. That's what it looks like, right? You got it, all right? Comcast NBC Universal is a $110 billion company, but that's not to take anything away from what Comcast Spectacor and the business that Mr. Snyder, Mr. Roberts, John, and Peter built, comprises a lot of great companies. Ovations is food and beverage. They do not have people who drop things in the urinal and go and sell them. Comcast Sportsnet, Skate Zone, the Xfinity Live folks, New Era, certainly. I see Fred Maglione, who's also here, Pacquiolin, and our Global Spectrum, and of course ourselves. Analytics, consulting, and sales, very quickly. We have offices here as it was opened up. We do $650 million in contractually obligated income and $750 million in what we can equivalized analytics. If you're going to build a stadium, you're going to turn to our folks to determine is the stadium going to actually work. And those are the kinds of things that we do. We represent lots of properties, and about 3 years ago, when Peter and John and I started talking about the next generation of revenue inside Comcast Spectacor, Dick Sherwood, my predecessor, had built a great company. And I had sold my old agency and bought a professional hockey club and was pretty much tooling around watching my kids grow. And Peter and John and I started talking about, we do all this great stuff inside the business of Comcast Spectacor. To get to the next level, we're going to need more skill sets, we're going to need different people, and re-engineer this. They had a very good company, and they wanted to go from very good to great. And that's when it takes lots of guts, because what happens often in this time, if you're in the agency business, there's no option. You're either getting bigger or smaller every day. And it's a lot of fun for me to go to a company that already had an established and mature line of business, than say Post Skiing Company, where it was easy and fun to fight against CA and IMG and take a couple wins. But we have done in 18 months pretty significant growth, primarily in the international and national sports properties, picking up the Fiesta Bowl, the America's Cup, English Premier League clubs. We're about to announce a new relationship here in a few days. We have 10% of this weekend's Indianapolis 500 field with sponsorships and partnerships with Hewlett-Packard, as well as Lucas Oil and Catherine Legge, who is the first female driver from the UK to make the race, racing for Angie's List. How many see Angie List commercials? Angie Hicks? Yeah? Okay. You talk about truth and congruency and the new normal, and I'm going to get to that in a minute as it relates to fan engagement. Angie said, Chris, we're in. It's a lot of money to sponsor these cars, but I want a female race car driver. I said, it's going to be difficult to find a female race car driver. The best one in the world is racing in Daytona, and she's not coming back. And there aren't many of them that can turn a car at 225 miles an hour, but we'll do the best we can. So we sent off one of our guys, and we came back with Catherine Legge, who, you want to talk about guts? With 19 hours of practice, put the car in the show at 226 miles an hour. So I sent a note to Catherine and said, you have all the respect in the world, because what you did was unbelievable. And if you watch her this weekend, she's a long shot to win, but she might. We do all the things you see up there: venue, promotional support, ideation, which is kind of a term that I don't really like, but we use it because everybody else understands it. It just means we sit and think things up. We make things up, and we go out and we sell them. This is what we have to do today. We have to frame the discussion. Fan engagement, what I was asked to talk about. And we're going to get into some really meaty details. We're going to go real quick. So why does sports work both on site? Well, it works on site because television works first, right? And until you've got a better medium, TV's still going to be the place you get mass eyeballs. But it's not just the advertisers, because the first thing they think is, well, there's a lot of advertisers. You're going to hear from a lot of smart people today, much smarter than I, on how they run very successful teams. And pay attention to them, because the fact is that there's certain margins within the business that they're outperforming in this market than, say, other markets are performing that might be twice as big. It was always easy for me to tell Scott O'Neill, hey, Scott, it's easy, you're in New York City. Not so easy if you're sitting there in Sacramento. Not so easy if you're sitting there in Milwaukee. And we'd have a little bit of a laugh about it, but you understood what I was trying to say. There were just different market dynamics. But when you look at this, there's two ways to look at sports: affiliate fee growth and ad revenue growth. If you look on the left, NBC, Universal, Time Warner, and Viacom all have had significant affiliate fee growth. That's the fee that we as cable subscribers pay to the cable company to actually have the channel. The most successful of those channels being regional sports networks. That's why Time Warner was willing to say, hey, look, we're in for the Dodgers gig. We'll go out, put a lot of money. One of my old bosses, Dr. Schiller, who was chairman of the U.S. Olympic Committee, was the losing bidder for the Los Angeles Dodgers at $1.6 billion. He was also chairman of Yankee Nets and said, I don't think we can make any money on this. Well, Guggenheim, who actually bought the team, writes their own book. That means they write their own interest rates. So they were actually able to do something that no one else was in the bidding group. They could actually write the return on investment they were going to give. Gets really technical, but they were willing to do it because they knew that Time Warner was saying, we're losing money and we've got to create a new sports channel, because a sports channel gets paid $4 to $5 or $6 per subscriber. Highest being ESPN, which is about $5.35. Ad revenue growth, though, is pretty flat. Look at those numbers: 2.5, 1 point, under 2. So you need both to make this work, because what we're going to talk about is the flip that becomes return on investment, which is the way we all sold to the way you're going to sell return on influence. This is the discussion you need to know about. DVR-proof programming, right? How many times shift their sports, right? Nobody. How many times shift their TV shows? A lot of hands, all right? This is a fact, and this is why sports is a great place to be, and it's good job security for everybody in this room, particularly for us older folks, because at the end of the day, this really matters. Within a 7-day period that Nielsen audits now how you watch your television, and this matters to Comcast and anybody in the television business, dramas and comedies, 39 to 42% of the regular audience doesn't watch it when the programmer sat there and said, you know, I think on Tuesday nights they're going to want to watch this. Doesn't happen like that. When I was a kid, you watched Tuesday nights, Happy Days. You knew Happy Days was coming on, you watched Happy Days. We didn't have DVRs, but I knew Happy Days was on. Kids today don't do that. They don't do it at all. In fact, parents don't do it. However, one piece of sports programming, live event programming, both award ceremonies and live events, do not get DVR'd. Look at those numbers. Less than 4% of the audience in the entire U.S. will DVR anything related to sports. So those are really significant numbers, and again, pushes up the ad rate base, but more importantly, the affiliate rate base. So why do you see the rise of award shows and the E shows and the red carpet shows? In the last 2 years, we've created the NHL awards, the MLB awards, the awards for this, the awards for that, because people will come to watch awards. They want to see what the guys are wearing, what the girls are wearing. Red carpet shows are some of the best live programming you're going to have, and you're going to see 3 more new shows. Now, there's an old saying in this business, sports and the Academy Awards are going to be the only things on. And they're not too far off. ABC paid $78 million for a 3-hour broadcast this year for the Academy Awards, and they made money on it. This is another thing you're going to need to know, the computational progression of technology. In 1980, the technology and the very iPads you're using cost about $100 million, according to InnoVantage. It's a tech fund out of San Francisco. By the way, everything we're showing you, you can have, and it's all fact-based. We don't come up here and do fact and bull. Okay? We're not allowed to do that, Comcast Spectacor Front Row. That same technology right now costs $300. That's crazy. The iPad cost $100 million to have that technology back then. So it's fast-growing technology that's starting to equivalize the field. I'm not going to get too detailed on this. I think we all know smartphones and tablets, but there is a difference. As tablets are becoming more and more part of your life, remember, we're an agency. We don't just speak for the teams that Comcast Spectacor has. We have to speak for all the teams, and we have to look around the corners. That's what people hire us to do. That's why teams hire us, to say, hey, what's coming up next? How do I know where I need to be? But one of the things that Apple said to us at the Innovation Summit last year was part of the reason they went to a smaller iPad was very simple. Women were not buying iPads. They were starting to flip to smaller Android devices. And the reason they weren't is you couldn't take the big iPad and stick it in your purse. Something so simple. And they missed it in all their focus reports. So that's why the little iPad came out, and it's done incredibly well, particularly with women, because they can take it, put it in a thing, and say, hey, I got now. What you do have, though, is that all these people watch a lot of video. They read and access their information differently. That's going to change. So we talk about things, right? UGC. How many people know what UGC is? Well, that's fair. All the people from Comcast, thankfully, we all know it, right? User-generated content. User-generated content is the new on-demand. If you're saying on-demand matters to you, that's technology from 2 years ago. Throw it away. User-generated content is the #1 issue we're dealing with when we apply sponsorships to sports, and it's something that every team has to pay attention to. Last week, CEA Sports, AEG, and Front Row were the 3 presenting partners to the NBA Marketing Summit in Los Angeles. This was one of the #1 initiatives along with analytics. So we frame this discussion as ads, contents, and engagement, planning mobile around your creative in advance, connecting to the person by location, which you can do now, right? Do a deal with Wawa. By the way, the Sixers just bought you a cup of coffee when you walk in. You can do this. This is real, and it's happening. Mobile ad spending is going to increase by $2.5 billion in the U.S. alone, 36% in search alone. All right, content, teaser versus medium versus long form. You know, part of this stuff becomes what we call the truth currency, the relationship error in sports, which is going to change the way we buy and shop and do anything, not just in sports, entertainment, and other things across the board. Part of your ongoing strategy, and you're going to start to see teams create chief social officers. This stuff really, really matters. All right? And you also have to be a lot more honest with the customer base, because you know what? They're smart. What Mike talked about, I'm going to allude to in a slide when it comes to how television shows these games. Engagement, searchable, shareable. Now this is the most important, snackable. Just enough information that I can see it between the car, between the train, between class, snackable information, right? You're going to get the parts where you have to be not just more honest and transparent. Everybody says that. You know, the neat thing with fan engagement in the sports business, and I've been lucky and fortunate enough to do it for a long time, it's kind of like lobsters from Kansas. It doesn't really exist, right? Doesn't exist. We say, well, we do it and we love our fans. Do we? I used to say this to Peter 2 years ago. When the game's over, what are we talking about? Because I want to talk about that the ice goes in a couple days, right? I can tell you how many days the ice goes back in to go play next year. That's how bad of a fan I am, right? Talk to me in the off season as much as you want to talk to me 6 weeks out. The worst at it are the New York Jets, and I remind our senior vice president, Lee Stacy, who was with the Jets, that the Jets are probably the worst at fan engagement I've ever seen of anybody else out there. And I've said this to Mark Rickey, he's a friend, and they know they have to fix it, which is why they lead the league in PSL drop-offs probably consistently and maybe for the next 2-3 years. But engagement by M-commerce and T-commerce, tablets. If you've gone to the games, more and more people taking tablets. Certain teams are generating whole strategies around the tablet alone. And in certain ballparks, and if Uskin's talked to this from his relationships with MLB, Bob Bowman wired up all the baseball stadiums and is continuously going ahead, and they're way ahead of everybody else as it relates to technology at this point, about how you use your M-commerce and T-commerce strategies in the ballpark. Another frame discussion, bless you. 50 million consumer adoption rates. It took 38 years for the cassette recorder to have 50 million users. It took 39 days for Android to do it. Pretty crazy, huh? Just nuts. Now this is an interesting one. On any given day, there's 16,750 iPhones, iPads purchased. There's 16,000 babies. Is that crazy? All right? That's just nuts, okay? That's the Accenture study on mobile. How about this one? Billions in active use. 6 billion mobile phones. 4.2 billion toothbrushes. All right? So we all laugh and we figure, well, there's a whole country that's not brushing their teeth. No, it's the fact that the majority of us now have 2.5 devices. And that's also changing. We're using our phone for one thing and our handset or laptop or now your iPad or Android device for something completely different. And you're going to see much more of that. This is the next issue we just had a discussion about 10 months ago. And if you notice, the delta here is 2 lines crossing, desktop and laptop versus mobile. In this case, for the discussion, it was an Android, but you could also make the same application Android or iPad. At the end of this year, the first time in history of any computing that mobile commerce and iPads are going to cross over the desktop delta. If you're designing something for your desktop, throw it out and consider it lost revenue because it's just not going to be there because the customer, by the time it comes to the table, simply wants it on their handset or they want it on their iPad. Very quickly, 3 ways you're going to connect to the sport business. On the wall, on your lap, or in your hand. Which one do you have the most intimate relationship with? Carry it everywhere. The one in your hand. So the snackable information that we talked about, the ability to spend and purchase with it, if you own that market, you're going to be good. 72% of people who own tablets, both Android or iPad, we show an iPad here, will make a purchase on a weekly basis. Now this is really crazy. And what's really interesting about that is whole sites are being generated around this. If you go to a sports team, how many teams generate just something you can get wired into the stadium that day that says, I'm going to buy something right now with my iPad? Right now. Now, we were fortunate enough on the Global Spectrum side to manage Kansas City, which probably had the best technology I've ever seen. But it was also an interesting play. And I said to Rob Heineman one time, it's the first stadium I've ever been to where you could sit here and see the whole thing, and it was great. But here's what was happening. I was watching this, and there'd be a goal, and you'd hear it, and you'd go, oh, there's a goal. Oh, there's a goal. So it took you away from the experience a little bit too much, right? And a good friend of mine at Pepsi said to me, you know, there's an issue with Kansas City that we have a concern with. And I said, really, what is it? She goes, you know what? We sponsor all these things in skiing. Snow skiing. I said, okay, well, what do you mean? She goes, all I want is a ticket and I want to ski. I said, you know, that's a pretty good idea. And, you know, Deidre, I get your point. The technology was good. It was additive, but it was actually taking you away from watching the field. So then it actually worked against you. But in T-commerce, you are spending a lot of money. Now, where are our challenges? Gate revenues companies, comprise the largest revenue sector of North American sports industry. Now, what gets the sexy front lines is the NFL has this big TV contract or such and such has a big TV contract. The vast majority of leagues don't have that. The National Hockey League exists. The NBA exists, primarily off the gate revenues. Okay, you have to look at it. Otherwise, there's cash calls on all these teams. And there's cash calls on most of the teams anyway. And that's the, end of the quarter when all the other owners have to come up with $8 to $6 million somewhere and say, hey, look, we got to pay payroll. Balancing the increase in gate prices with the lack of proportional increases in experience quality is the biggest challenge you face on a fan engagement, which is why so much of this is moving to digital space, where you have an ability to talk to the customer in a unique way. Now, the Television Consumer Freedom Act. How many people know what that is here? I'm just curious. A couple good hands. Not bad. That's actually John McCain's act, and it's the second time it's going to go to the Hill. If this gets done, it changes everything in one shot. And it's also why Comcast 3 years ago said, at some point, the non-fan, this one right here, the non-fan is going to wake up and say, you know what, I've never watched a sporting event in my life. I could care less about ESPN, NBC Sports, or any one of the others. I don't want to pay $7 a subscriber. We exist in this room, folks, because the non-fan doesn't have the balls to get up and say, I don't want to do that anymore. But if they ever did, guess what happens? A la carte pricing comes in, and then the whole thing crashes. Unless you're smart enough to get yourself into digital space fast and own the content. Hence, Comcast buys NBC, because content's still king. So they're going to be able to have it on both sides of the transaction. Time Warner doing the same thing, creating regional sports networks as fast as you possibly can. Because that's what happens if that Television Consumer Freedom Act passes. You now don't have to pay $7 for your ESPN because you're never going to watch it. You're simply going to buy ESPN.com. Pretty big transition, and it could affect everything that we do here. And it's not negative, it just means we have to adjust for it. 78% of the marketers in a recent poll that we were a part of told us they plan to increase their use of social media data posted by consumers in the upcoming year. Not us, not a sports team, not an agency, the actual consumers, right? It's the Angie's list of the information age. How many people know what Quora is? Anybody gone to Quora? Yeah, some of our, all right. Quora, get to it quickly. Quora, probably going to be the fastest growing social site that provides, I think, tangible, usable information. I could care less about Lady Gaga's slippers, but I am interested in the business of lots of different things. And Quora has a unique way that they vet people. If you go on there and answer questions that others don't think merit your submission and admission to the crowd, they vote you out. You're off the island. You don't get to play anymore. So you can't go in there and write some snarky comment. You got to be legitimate. The idea is to help everybody. This leapt off the page. Again, why you're going to start to see teams and companies, and we follow the trends of other companies, create chief social officers. Lots of money in that. The relationship era begins. If you type I love in Google, and we're going to use Google here in this case, if you typed in I love Apple, as of March 7th, you got 3,270,000 hits. Starbucks got 2,700,000 hits. If you typed in I love Citibank, only 21,000 people said I love Citibank. Only 3 people in the world said I love Dow. 3 people, we have 5 billion people in the world. 3 billion people, 2 billion people. 3 people said I love Citi, I love Dow rather. Citi and Dow are both major Olympic sponsors because they need the imagery that sports offers them, because nobody cares about what Dow does until they come to sports, or Citi when they come to sports. And if you talk to Citi, they'll tell you this is one of the biggest issues because nobody likes their bank, right? They've got to get in the system. This is fact. This is what happens when a relationship era changes. It's a Rubik's Cube. Brands can no longer project the image of their choosing. Okay? I had the great pleasure of going to, really for the first time in a long time, Sixers game because my 9-year-old was going to play basketball and she wanted to see it all. And it was an interesting play because I've gone to a lot of games through the years, mostly in New York because that's where I was living. But it was interesting to watch the Sixers dynamics and the Knicks dynamics and watch my daughter's dynamics too interacting with the game. But on the ride home, all we talked about was the fact that they had a player that played bowling, right? Now, the Sixers had an interesting play there. Did they step up to the bowling question? Well, everybody knew what was happening, and it's okay, you can go bowl. Everybody's real. Everybody's honest, okay? That was an interesting, snackable moment for the Sixers, but they couldn't control it. When the buyer comes to me, the first question I ask our staff, pragmatically, are we an aspirin or a vitamin to the consumer or to the buyer? If we're an aspirin, I can ask more from my sponsor. The best aspirin product right now in the Philadelphia sports marketplace is PNC Bank's sponsorship of the Philadelphia Eagles radio broadcast. You cannot be in this world as a bank and compete against Citizens Bank at Philadelphia, Lincoln at the Eagles, or Wells Fargo at the NBA and the NHL. So PNC is effectively locked out. But if you listen to that broadcast, it's all PNC, and it's brilliant. And I've said that to Bill Mills. I don't know where the Eagles are, but it's probably one of the best people. You laugh, right? I probably helped you on that one. Not in a good way? Okay. But Bill loves the broadcast. But you can't do it. But is it aspirin or is it vitamin? Because most sports sponsorships are vitamin sponsorships. Very few things that we're actually going to be able to do because we don't make their product. So for Dow, it's a vitamin. It's additive to their existing product line. They need it. If it's an aspirin, though, and they have a serious problem, they'll pay through the nose sometimes to get to it, especially if there's a foreign investment. I'm not going to bore you with this, but this is how you get the numbers. When we presented this to the NBA, I know, John, if you want a copy of this is actually, if you do this, it comes out to a very big, for lack of a better word, algorithmic strategy. And I'm not going to go from alpha to iota here, but we actually do the measurement. And that's how we go back to John Page and say, here's how much money is in Seattle for Chris Hansen's NBA team. This is how the leagues are put together. This isn't new. This is 1974. If I get the name of the book, but actually a lot of this comes off of how the sports leagues, and these drafts still exist, by the way, okay? Current TV modeling. Mike mentioned last night's episode. That was all over in the New York SPJ Awards before the game was done. The current model, and I'm going to suggest this is depending on around you, 4 cameras, 6 cameras, 12 camera shoots. The fact is, and now you have 20,000 cameras in the stadium, 18,000 cameras in the stadium. The technology that existed to actually do the editing, there's a company out there called Magic, and there's another company called Montage. Find those companies out. They were the global award winner at South by Southwest. They allow consumers to program what effectively looks as good as any TV show right from their camera, right from their cell phone, their mobile phone. So all of a sudden, now they're the executive producer of the show. What used to be, I want to show the fan this, you got 68,000 editors and executive producers on an Eagles game. Different. That's what happened last night. One of those executive producers was in the restroom and said, look at that, guy's putting the snow cones down in the urinal. Interesting. Is engagement new? It's not new. Okay? Channel 29, for those of you who lived in Philadelphia, for 7 years ran Bowling for Dollars. Right? I see some laughter about that. This is going to be a little bit older, but the fact is, Bowling for Dollars won its time slot every year because you'd call on the phone. Not everybody had a residential home phone at the time. Phone was new. And say, hey, Deborah, you're going to watch Patty Butler bowl, and if she bowls a strike, you get $100. And by the way, you're going to watch today's 4 o'clock movie to the 6 o'clock show, right? And it worked incredibly well. We do the same thing now. We just call it something different. It's not new. It's just applying the technologies. That's really all it becomes. This one shut off on any agency that's in any business. But Oreo, who did a great job, essentially and effectively ambushing the events of the Super Bowl. But this event was even more important in the eyes of an agency. It didn't cost $1 in media spend. They got 1.7 million impressions off the Oreo pound cake recipe because they were being honest and truthful, and they went out to their congruence strategies, all the people who baked and cooked and shopped and liked Oreos and their likes. This is the stuff I tell our folks all the time. Get the trust through social media quickly. Figure it out. Take care of the customer. Be honest with them. They're not crazy. And they get it when you have a bad game. And it's okay to say, boy, we really stunk up the joint. That's all right. Be congruent. Be credible with them, and you'll build what I call return on influence. And then you'll be able to go to Lay's potato chips and say, I'll convert 3 of every 5 buyers from hers to Lay's, and I'll show you how we're going to do it. And then you can actually get a piece of the supermarket money. And that's when it really leaps off. And NASCAR has done probably the best job of any of the leagues doing that. Having said that, I really do appreciate the time to walk through a lot of slides very quickly. You're going to hear a lot smarter people on their respective teams. And I appreciate the time and effort you've all put into this event. And thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity.